For the past several years now, I've had the same email signature. It might be quite familiar to you if you've had any extended correspondence with me during that time. Life is just a chance to grow a soul, it reads. This line is attributed to the Reverend Dr. A. Powell Davies, the late Unitarian minister who served All Souls Church in Washington, D.C. There seems to be a general misconception that UU ministers and religious progressives in the main do not care too much about the state of souls. Yet that is far from the truth. While we may not care so much about winning souls, we do care a great deal about growing them. In fact, that is what I consider to be a chief job description in ministry. I help folks to grow their souls. Dr. Davies' line is included in my email signature primarily as a reminder to myself. Whatever else is keeping me so preoccupied, I should not lose sight of job one. A key contemporary of Dr. Davies in ministry was the Reverend Sophia Lyon Foss, a woman who made a lifelong study of spiritual development starting at the earliest ages. Like many women of her generation, she taught a good long while in Sunday school. She was born the child of Presbyterian missionaries in China, and for much of her younger life, she expected to follow in their footsteps on international missions. But she married a minister who was called to New York City and raised her children there instead. As a religious educator in an urban environment, she made a close study of the religious impulses of children. One of the girls in her Sunday school, who had recently welcomed a baby sister at home, especially enjoyed a class project where Reverend Foss had children grow marigolds from seeds planted in paper cups. In pure wonderment, that girl told her, God is what knows how to grow. God is what knows how to grow. Reverend Foss gave a great deal of thought about the sorts of conditions that would allow spiritual growth to take place across the lifespan. And religious beliefs mattered, Reverend Foss understood, because they could either promote or thwart individual growth. Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness. Other beliefs nurture self-confidence and enrich the feeling of personal worth, she noted. Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world. Other beliefs are pliable, like the young sapling, ever growing with the upward thrust of life. Reverend Foss always wanted to go with that upward thrust of life. In her 50s, after she had reared her own children, she completed graduate studies in religious education, and soon she was supervising Sunday school teachers in a flagship congregation in New York and teaching on the faculty of her seminary. Yet her pedagogy was considered too controversial at that time, and that ended her academic career. In her 60s and 70s, she went on to author dozens of children's books and religious curricula for Unitarian and Universalist churches, and eventually joined one of those herself. In her 80s, she was ordained into ministry. After she retired at the age of 88, she continued to write and remained prolific until her death at the age of 101. As committed as she was to fostering growth in others, she never stopped growing herself. According to Reverend Foss, 3 contemplative practices were crucial to spiritual growth. She enumerated these as, first, the quiet meditation on life. Second, the reaching out toward the universal and the infinite. And third, the courageous facing of one's profoundest wishes. But people could do this only to the extent that they were not overly distracted by the dailiness of their living. Only to the extent that they were attuned to both their experiences and emotional responses to those. Approached in the proper spirit, life itself proved instructive. It constituted a religious education curriculum in its own right. When she was ordained in her 80s, Reverend Foss preached her own ordination sermon, which was unheard of at the time, but it seemed such a soulful decision on her part. Our souls speak to the world through our own lives, and she clearly wanted for her soul to have its say. Ministry and religion cannot be divided into separate categories, she told the church in Bethesda, Maryland. Instead, religion should instill in us a sense of the unity of our existence. Earlier this morning, we heard one of our very fine worship associates reflect on the importance of a person's total self. It seems to me that the growth of any single soul can serve as an inspiration to all of us, however late or early, continuously or intermittently that happens in a given life. In one of her children's chapels, Reverend Foz joined the children in an intergenerational imaginative exercise. Together, they envisioned their grandparents, and then their grandparents' grandparents, and then their grandparents' grandparents' grandparents, and so on, back through millennia, and even millions of years. She noted that this group was exhilarated to discover that none of them could imagine the very beginnings of their lives. And that, in fact, as she noted, we must then all be very, very, very old, or at least something within us must be billions of years old. Some people may refer to our immortal or our eternal selves, but Reverend Foz understood our souls to be timeless in ways that we will never completely grasp. After that chapel ended, Reverend Foz overheard the children excitedly telling their other Sunday school teachers, "We are as old as you are. We are as old as you are." Our souls seem to hold that totality of existence. We are somehow as old and also as young as one another. Our souls contain an impulse toward growth. They are always taking our emotions and experiences, quiet meditations, and profoundest desires, and translating them into insights that we can share with one another in our spiritual communities. The All Souls Church that Dr. Davies headed was one of the better known congregations of that name, but there are several other All Souls churches among our UU congregations. They all belong to the same era of church planting. Back then, churches were not to be named in honors of saints, but of souls. Not in honor of individuals, but in honor of our collectives. In the 1800s, decades before Sophia Lyon Foz was born near to the end of that century, the Reverend William Ellery Channing declared, "I am a living member of the great family of all souls, and I cannot improve or suffer myself without diffusing good or evil around me through an ever-enlarging sphere. I belong to this family. I am bound to it by vital bonds. Souls indeed are sustained by their bonds to one another." Scholars have observed that Reverend Foz's life and career spanned no fewer than 4 distinct eras in religious history, starting in the 19th century and ending in the 1970s. The missions she envisioned herself serving and the ones she later did were different, but I imagine that she herself was able to trace a through line between them. Our souls appreciate the holistic unity of experience across our own lifespans. Life gives us a chance to grow a soul, certainly, but we should also expect that it will take us an entire lifetime to do so. Consider the various eras of your own life. How many can you tally? Through all of these, what have been the constants in your soul? While our souls may be timeless, they are stubbornly situated in actual times. At long last, we seem to be coming to the end of a long stretch of days strung together through a painfully prolonged pandemic. Recently, I read an article making predictions about the summer of 2021, a time of MALT, it said, M-U-L-T. MALT is an acronym that stands for Making Up for Lost Time. I do expect that the coming months will have a certain ebullience to them. We tasted some of that together this past Friday evening when we had our lovely year-end celebration in the church courtyard. But in soulful living, no time is ever truly lost. Our souls have a remarkable capacity to integrate our experiences and emotions in such a way that we can be enlarged by them. The soul is not intent on achieving speed. Instead, it takes time and makes time. Reverend Falls insisted that we all need to learn how to think about ordinary things until insights and feelings are found which have a religious quality to them. This reflective capacity that humans have is something each of us can develop in the service of our collective growth. All of you have been growing your souls for a while now, I know. So how well have you been tending to them lately? How might you tend to them even better yet? Since we have been progressively freed from anxiety about whether our souls are saved or damned, we can give much more careful attention to whether they are magnified or diminished by the way we move individually through our days and, yes, even through our decades. And also by the way that we relate to the great family of all souls holding our spheres of existence. Perhaps the hardest thing for any of us to throw off this late in history is a regrettable sense of time urgency, of us racing against some clock. Yet our souls can still show us how to live.